Hi, I'm Tom, and this is Why Do Men, the podcast exploring male behaviour in dating and relationships. From the evolution of dating apps, online dating, right through to trends like ghosting and catfishing, differing relationship types like E&M and polyamory, it's never been more confusing to find love and healthy relationships. Each episode is going to feature a special guest as we try to figure out why do men. All right, this week's topic focuses on something which I've had a lot of questions about. It's about communication. Why do men struggle to communicate in relationships? And I guess for me, that covers a whole spectrum of different points, from showing vulnerability, emotional suppression, gender differences, and even stigma around things like talking therapies. To help me unpick this, I'm joined by life coach, author, in all honesty, podcast host, Michelle Elman, whose book, The Selfish Romantic, is all about how to date without feeling bad about yourself. Michelle's someone that I've met before. She can give a really unique female perspective on male communication. Welcome, Michelle.
Lovely to see you again.
Hi, how you been doing?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah?
Excited to be on your podcast.
Oh my God, I'm excited too. For context for the viewer, I was on Michelle's, a couple of months ago?
It was the summer, so yeah, more than that. It's
Yeah.
like a year catch up. This is our reunion.
But it's nice to see you again. We did some really good TikTok stuff, didn't we? About
Yeah, showing you the ropes.
Yeah, exactly. Still absolutely clueless. So might put your brain about it afterwards.
To be fair, it's probably better for your brain to not get good at TikTok. It's one of those things that really shortens your attention span.
Honestly, I find it's something which is addictive and poisonous in equal measure.
Yeah, it's learning how to keep your phone out of the bedroom and that kind of stuff.
How do you do it? You're amazing at just smashing out the videos, but like,
It's all being done in one day, and then I'm trying to actually... The rest of my week is trying to spend as little time as possible on my phone.
yeah, exactly. I think it's
Just keeping the mental health in check.
absolutely. Thank you for coming on today. We're going to talk about communication, and I know it's quite a broad topic, specifically around relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, the first thing I just wanted to pry into is, do you think that there is a problem with men and how they communicate their needs and their wants in romantic relationships?
I mean, not even just men. I think talking about technology, one of the ways that our communication has changed a lot is that actually, if you don't have a similar texting compatibility relationship to technology, that's such a communication difference when it comes to relationships. But also, it's adapted how we talk to each other, because there's a level of anonymity when you can text someone and you're not looking at them face to face. But also, if you look at the research that's out there, actually so little of our communication is the words we say. It's body language, it's the tone of voice. And when you're doing that over text, that actually doesn't exist. And I think that's what's also led to the anonymity, and the fact that you can do things in a more cowardly way means we have become more avoidant. And then what happens with men is that on top of that, they've got the training to be more avoidant. If we look at the fact that it's a patriarchy and women have been seen to be the feelings people, the talking people, then men get given the excuse, but also get shamed for trying to talk about their feelings, talk about what they're going through, all of these things, because it's seen as like, oh, well, don't be a pussy, frankly.
Yeah.
Like, that's the toxic masculinity of it all.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's such a complex topic, because how do we start changing it? Well, where do we begin? Do we start unpicking that it's seen as a feminine thing to talk about your feelings? Or do we actually look at the technology side of it and go, well, why are we hiding behind phones and not just having the difficult conversations, even if it's just ending the relationship rather than just disappearing?
Right. And this is it. There's a couple of things I want to unpack with that, because that point around femininity, and I find it still very confusing. And this is a massive talking point on social media, and even more broadly than that. It's like masculinity is changing, and this view of masculinity is changing. And I see that as quite a good opportunity for a lot of men to really sort of redefine what masculinity means to them. And this is something we've spoken about in the past, right? Like, I would classify myself as quite a good communicator. And a big part of that is about showing vulnerability and admitting your own flaws. It's something I've had to do a lot, as you know, and being a bit more accountable. But for some reason, that is still seen as quite a feminine trait.
Well, actually, even take 2 steps before that. So the reason why you're able to communicate your feelings is because you had a curiosity about your communication style, which led you to seek therapy that changed your behavior. A lot of people are starting even before that point.
Right.
They think communication style is set. they go into it with a very, this is how I communicate, you accept it or you don't. And so there is no curiosity around changing their behavior or wanting to be better. And I think that's where sometimes we take for granted our strengths, and that's where one of your strengths is. And some people don't have that or don't have the curiosity to want that.
So, but I mean, you're absolutely right. And if I could think about the rationale for me wanting to change that, it was because of my own behavior and how it's communication, but sometimes more broadly than that, sometimes about other behaviors. Like, you talked about avoidance. And I was like, well, having that sort of ability to look inward and think, right, the way that I'm communicating to other people is actually causing a lot of stress to them and it's hurting them. And that's not just in romantic relationships. That's my ability to communicate, my needs and wants to my friends and my family. Like I find this whole topic really interesting because when I think about my friendships, they are so strong now. And that's because I tell them when I need something. And I have this view that human beings inherently want to help other people, right? And the worst relationships that I have, romantic, friends, family, whatever, is when I don't communicate what I need to other people.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think especially in friendships, I found that once I became a really direct person, and then funnily enough, talking about the masculine feminine thing, I'm very direct for a woman. And that makes people uncomfortable. But what it did to my friendships was, because I say what I mean and I mean what I say, it got rid of a lot of the stereotypes around female friendships of like, oh, does she hate me? I'm like, you will know if I hate you. You will also know if I'm angry with you because I will just say it. It won't be on my face. It will actually be the words that come out my mouth. But I think that's a very confronting thing for women, because in the same way that men have been given the permission to be direct,
yeah,
women haven't. But then as a result, that directness that like men get praised for also comes with this avoidance of whenever they have a hard conversation, they don't know how to confront it. And I don't like stereotyping, but it does seem to be that men have the ability to, especially in the world of dating, to go, oh, that's a scary thing, like conversation I don't want to have. Let's just pretend it doesn't exist.
right.
And so that's how the ghosting happened. It's not them consciously looking at it going, I'm not replying to her
Yeah,
forever. It's them going, not right now, not right now. And then it just disappears from their mind. And then the woman's likely sat there being like, oh, it's been 2 weeks. Are we still doing a thing? Is this a thing? Like, I'm confused. What are we? Um, and all of this leads to an absence of communication when actually, if you're not interested, just tell the person.
this is it. And that's obviously in the context of ghosting and breakups. But I've been in situations with women where I've been in relationships with them and they might have uncovered something that feels a little bit uncomfortable. So it might be something about my past which I didn't want to reveal immediately. It might be the fact that I'm still in contact with an ex and I haven't told them that yet. But for some reason, certainly, 10, 15 years ago, if I was confronted with that information, I would find that conflict really difficult. And my modus operandi, my immediate reaction would be, I'd rather not be in the relationship than work through it. And
I think immediate reaction is probably the thing that is the answer to it all. You actually don't need to give a response in the moment, and people feel like they have to. So they either feel like you have the conversation now or we're never having this conversation. And actually you can return to something that upset you and go, hey, so I understand you were upset about the fact that I was in contact with an ex, but it also wasn't okay that you said this and that. And can we talk about the conversation that we had yesterday? Or if you're in the middle of the conversation, hey, I need 5 minutes. Like, this is overwhelming. And I'll come back to you in 5 minutes. And if you come back in 5 and you're like, I'm still not ready, I need 10 more minutes. Can we talk about it tomorrow? I have a really busy deadline today. Like, can I just submit the thing so you can have my full concentration? But I think sometimes because we're in such a rush to have it here, now, immediate, it ends up being an unproductive conversation, and that's when it gets really heated and you say hurtful things, and then you're so busy doing the damage repair of the hurtful thing and not the actual issue that started it all. And so that's why when it comes to communication, especially around like conflict conversations, like the things that you mentioned of like an ex coming up or like a past experience coming up, it's saying things like, next time I would prefer if. So that's how you make it constructive and how you change the relationship so that the conversation you're having is not just about the issue itself, but also about future issues coming up as well.
Yeah.
So it could be something like, next time I'd actually just rather know, even if it's going to hurt my feelings, I'd rather just you be honest and you tell me up front. I don't want to have to find out these things via another person. That was the element of this conversation that was embarrassing to me. And I just need us to be on the same team so that all the information I find out comes from you.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And I mean, it also makes perfect sense on the flip side, where like I know myself well enough now to know that when I have a difficult conflict situation with my girlfriend, you know that old adage about like don't go to bed on an argument.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think that's a load of bollocks.
It's the worst advice in the world.
Pleased that you're
Also, I have a really bad temper and like I've worked really hard to like, I have not yelled at someone in a really long time, but it's like, it's probably been about a decade now, but I had a really bad temper when I was younger. And that thing
Yeah.
meant you're just screaming match till 2 a.m. You're sleep deprived. You need to go to bed.
Yeah.
You're both tired. Sometimes you've been drinking, which like not the time to have the conversation at all. And actually like, I have different rules now of like, especially in my last relationship, it was like, if we'd been drinking, we definitely do not have this conversation. If it's gone past a certain, I actually have this rule in my entire life of like, you don't believe your brain once it gets dark.
Right.
And I actually think that's why a lot of the heated arguments that happen are right before bed, because you've not had a single moment of peace and quiet in your day. And then you go to put your head on the pillow and suddenly all the conversations you've had through your day are replaying, but all the things you wish you'd said.
Exactly.
And then that's the moment you want to start it. When like, I remember there was one conversation with my ex where like, he started a conversation at 9 o'clock at night. I needed to be on this morning, the following morning. I was actually doing a segment on conflict resolution and it became a bit of a joke around that. And I remember going, do we need to do this right now? This is not urgent. Can we talk about this tomorrow? And I had to say it like 4 or 5 times before he dropped it. And I remember just being like, previously I would have probably bitten the second time and been like, fine, you want to talk about it? But I actually just like held my boundary and was like, this is not important. I have a really important job first thing tomorrow. I want to be focused. I want to have my full attention and I don't need us to stay up for another 2 more hours going through this when we could just talk about this tomorrow morning. I'll have finished TV. I'll be able to concentrate on this conversation and it will be more productive. And I think it's choosing your timing, knowing when to have the conversation, but also not being scared to have a clumsy and messy conversation. Like just because you don't do something perfectly doesn't mean you shouldn't try at all.
Yeah.
And when you're learning how to communicate, a lot of your beginning conversations will be really messy. You will mess up, you will say things, but that's where learning how to apologize is a really big part of it as well.
I find this really interesting. And I think this is, for me, the difference between men and women in terms of men naturally seem to lean towards more sort of problem solving communication. Whereas like, well, you present a problem to me and I want to solve it straight away. And that's not always the way that you resolve something like that. Like
The biggest issue in all my relationships has been I'm a highly emotional, sensitive person and I cry a lot, but I'm good to cry. And I'm also good to cry alone. And like, if you are working next door and I'm crying, I don't need you to come. Like, I would love if you want to come in and give me a hug.
that breaks my heart, Michelle. Like the idea of you crying in another room, like, because men just want to, like, that's a part of our nature.
But if that makes you so uncomfortable, you're welcome to come in. You're welcome to give me a hug. You don't need to solve my problem. Like, I make a joke that my like strategy in life is I'll cry about it and then I'll handle it. Like, I just need to cry about it. Like, I know what I need to do, but you coming in with like problem fixing mode is actually invalidating how I feel. And I think that's the part that a lot of men don't understand is like, I need to feel how I want to feel right now. Yes, the logic rational. I oftentimes already know the answer. I just am having feelings about it.
Right.
And so when someone comes in with a fix it mode, it's undermining the fact that I am a competent, capable human to both feel my own feelings, but also I actually have all the resources and knowledge to solve my own problem. And if I don't, I'll ask you. But like, don't jump in and swoop in and save me, because it's kind of undermining in the fact that you don't think I'm confident and capable enough and adult enough to both handle my emotions and resolve my own problems.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And I think there's this concept about active listening, which I've done a lot of reading around, which is like, you telling me or communicating why you might have an issue with me or about our relationship, like, I'm always open to that. But one thing I'm terrible at is actually just listening to what you're telling me, because every single point that you make, I'm like, how do I fix that and how do I solve that? And actually, sometimes all you need to do is just like sit with that information. One of the things that I've really started to learn is that, to that point around don't go to bed in an argument, like, I'm like, I need to go to bed on an argument because I actually need to figure out exactly how I feel about the information that's been presented to me. And then also, like, if I do need to solve it, what the right reaction should be. So, I mean, it's something that I experienced with my girlfriend. Like, she's like you, she can be like, her initial emotional reaction to something which I might see as quite trivial, sometimes it scares the shit out of me. And I'm like, but actually for her, it's not a big deal.
What's the fear? Like,
The,
that she was not going to be okay?
this is my own insecurity. It's a fear that she's presented something which I've seen as quite trivial, and she's got very upset about it. And I'm like, oh my God, I've completely missed the mark here. And actually she's going to break up with me over it.
Okay,
So,
so you've gone into your so this is where so let's say you got into an argument right before bed, and you're one person in the relationship wants to solve it there and then,
yeah.
and one person wants to go to bed and solve it in the morning.
Mhm.
I was always the person who wanted to solve it in the morning.
Yeah.
So what I did instead was like, what reassurance can I give you right now
Yes.
without us talking about the conversation? And so oftentimes my partner or like boyfriends in the past have been like, I just need to know we're okay. I just need to know that you're not angry. And I'll be like, I can't actually say I'm not angry right now, but what I can tell you is I want to resolve this. I love you. And that I am confident we're going to get through this
Exactly.
tomorrow morning. But like, I will give you all the reassurance you need that I want to be in this relationship. I have no plans in going anywhere, and we will solve this. We will fix that.
Yeah.
Is that enough for you to be able to sleep well tonight?
Exactly. And that's luckily the exact reaction which Gabs has to this stuff, where she was like, right, I understand that actually this conflict makes you feel quite uncomfortable because you see it in a very different, or you see my reaction in a very different way to how I'm feeling within that reaction. So, and her response was like, it doesn't mean anything for us. It's just, this is how I deal with it.
Also, because if you feel her feelings for her, then she's actually not learning how to feel her own feelings, and she already knows how to feel her own feelings. But I think that's where when someone jumps in to try to feel your feelings, it's almost then reversed because I feel like I have to caretake you. I have to make you feel so comfortable about me crying
Exactly.
that I'm actually not focused on me crying.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Do you think that men struggle to articulate how they're feeling more than women do?
Yes, because they've not been taught to be introspective, and a lot of women have a lot of conversations within their female friendship group of like dissecting things
Yeah.
and talking about things. And if a man has only ever had internal conversations about it, they only have their one perception, and it's very hard to understand. A lot of men say they internalize things, but also they process internally. And so then trying to unpick how you feel, like someone can't communicate how they feel if they actually don't know how they feel. So one of the main things I talk about is boundaries, and that's why when I teach boundaries, I say like, well, okay, you can't set a boundary unless you know your boundary is being crossed.
Yeah.
How do you know your boundary is being crossed? It will look like anger and resentment.
Mhm.
And those are basic emotional things that aren't really taught to anyone, men and women.
Yeah.
That like anger and resentment are the emotions there to teach you when to set your boundaries.
Right.
And then the next step is for every individual, anger is going to feel different in someone's body. To you, it could be like a tight ball in your stomach. To me, it could be a tight ball in my throat, like, or a lot of heat in my hands. Like anger feels different to different people, but actually noticing or going back into your memory and going, okay, let's remember a time I was angry and my boundaries had been crossed. How was I feeling? Go into your body and be like, where in my body was I feeling it? Okay, now I know what that feels like. The next time I feel that, I know when to set a boundary. So it's like reverse engineering it, but also like, why weren't we taught these things in school? Like, this is just such basic, like everyone says, feel your feelings. How do you feel your feelings? Like, that's what it means.
That point around anger, I wanted to labor on that a little bit because I haven't experienced an overwhelming feeling of anger in a lot of years, but my other half thinks that that's not a good thing. She's like, you should feel anger, and she gets angry at me sometimes for things that, as I was speaking about, which I see as quite trivial. Um, do you think that anger is something that you should experience? Is it a healthy?
The question I would ask you is, were you allowed to feel safe when you were angry as a child?
I experienced or I felt anger a lot as a kid. And if I'm honest with you, I mean, it created a lot of problems for my parents, and I think that that's something that I was quite aware of.
So if anger creates problems for the people you love most in the world, you learn to not be angry.
Exactly, that's the thing.
Which also, like, stereotypically, women are shamed for anger. So the fact that your girlfriend has a really good relationship with anger is actually quite unusual for women. Again, it's a stereotype, but in the same way that like men have usually a difficult relationship with sadness, and it sounds like it's quite reversed for you,
Yeah.
of like sadness is
Yes.
a much more comfortable emotion, but anger isn't. And
Absolutely.
I think it's all about what you got taught around that emotion. So I was penalized a lot for being angry as a child.
Right.
I was very angry. I'd had 15 surgeries and I was very angry about it, but I was never allowed to be angry. And so I got put in squash lessons actually, and that's how I learned how to. Well, squash lessons was how they thought I could healthily process anger, and it did help.
Yeah.
But I got a lot of berating around, like, you're such an angry young lady. Like, and so I learned to like squash the anger down. But your girlfriend's right. Anger is a very useful emotion. It's the only negative emotion that actually provides energy. Have you ever been completely exhausted and then you got angry about something and suddenly, like,
Okay, yeah.
you got this
Your
whole.
world's alive again. You're like, this is amazing. I'm so angry about that.
Exactly. And also, it's a necessary emotion because if you are able to healthily process anger, then it is temporary. It will go away. But we have a very confused idea of anger because of the behavior that comes out of anger rather than the emotion itself. So your anger is healthy, but how you process it or express it might not be. You're not allowed to yell and scream at people just because you're angry.
Yeah.
But like actually punching a pillow is a very healthy way of expressing anger. The issue is that because we have this idea of anger management, anger doesn't need to be managed, it needs to be processed. And those are two very different things. So a lot of actual healthy processing of anger looks aggressive from the outside, but the crux is it's a healthy expression of anger as long as you don't hurt yourself or anyone else. So
Yeah.
punching a pillow is really healthy. Yelling and screaming in the shower. Don't yell at people. You can yell in the shower. You can yell along to a really angry music, or throwing ice at the wall is something new that I've discovered. That was how I discovered my anger around my breakup. Mm, and it's great. You don't even need to tidy it up. But actually allowing yourself to have that anger and tap into it is also reconnecting with your body and detecting where that anger sits within your body.
I mean, it's unusual because I think, like, stereotype men, right? And you think men are much more used to expressing anger, and it's not necessarily through, like you say,
Oh, and it's not healthy whatsoever.
right. Well, this is it, and I was going to say it can be through very sort of physical pursuits, like and fighting, and even sports that are
It's
artistic,
when
right?
people are like, women are so emotional. Watch those clips of tennis players smashing their racket. And I'm like, oh, women are so emotional? Men are emotional. Anger is emotion too, but that's not a healthy expression of anger.
No, I agree.
And it's also not proportional to whatever took place.
Exactly.
And that's where, like, you have to look at when I see a man smashing a tennis racket because he lost the point,
Uh-huh.
I'm seeing a lot of repressed anger that is being used as an excuse in the same way that if you've ever been in a car with someone who has really bad road rage,
Yeah.
they're not actually that angry about the car, or like someone yelling at a waiter, they're not actually angry at the waiter. They've never given themselves permission to be angry about what they're actually angry about.
Yeah.
And so they're displacing it on something trivial and something that is actually more societally acceptable, because that road rage is seen as more acceptable than you saying, I'm really angry at my parents for neglecting me.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think this is the challenge for a lot of men is about. I think women are a lot more intuitive in understanding that whole journey, whereas for guys, right, like, I know a lot of my male friends that get incredibly frustrated at what seem like quite menial things, and to your point, it's not because of the task or the issue itself, it's because of something way deeper than that, and that's I mean, I've spoken so much about the beauty of, like, talking therapies, and I don't know if there's as much stigma anymore around talking therapy, but the problem for me isn't the stigma anymore, it's guys understanding why and how they use that stuff because
And also what I found, because I've been writing a book about friendship, and I looked at the difference between male and female friendship. they don't get deep within their friendship.
Yes.
So they might have a lot of people around. I mean, like,
Exactly.
one of the most horrific statistics I came across when I was doing research for Bad Friend is that they asked men if they had a close friend, and the measure of close friend was someone you'd ask to loan money or in a time of need.
Right.
And the name that these guys gave, some of these people were dead. Like, their closest friend
Yeah.
was dead and they didn't know.
Oh my God.
And
I thought
that
you meant they just befriended like a corpse.
no, as in, like, they were like, "Oh yeah, Tom's my close friend," and that they would call Tom and be like, "Oh."
Right.
Like, and it's funny, but it's also depressing.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that the marker for a close friend for a man can be someone they've not spoken to in 7 years, versus a woman would never call a close friend someone they've not spoken to for 7 years. And as a result, you ask men if they have friends, they absolutely say yes. But then a man is going through a breakup. Actually, have they spoken to a single one of their friends about, like, how heart-wrenching and heartbreaking that is?
Yeah.
Like, have you actually spoken to your friend about anything in depth? And it was even, like, small moments where, like, I set up when I was in a relationship, I set up one of his friends on a date.
Yeah.
And so I said to my boyfriend at the time, like, "Oh my God, how did the date go?" And he was like, "I don't know. Why would I ask about that?" And I was like, if I knew my friend was going on a date on a Tuesday,
You're the big
she'd be getting a call on Tuesday evening at 9 o'clock being like, "How did it go?" And, like, not having any of those conversations. Like, yes, they play Xbox or they watch sports together. And there's a lot of research around how men have a third object in all of their relationships. So it's sports or a video game or, like,
This is why golf is so popular, right? Because rather than looking into the whites of each other's eyes, you're working shoulder to shoulder.
it's an intimacy block.
Yeah, you don't have that intensity.
Yeah, and that you have a topic to talk about that isn't yourselves, or asking someone, "How are you doing? How are you feeling? What's life like for you at the moment?"
Yeah.
You can talk about the golf, you can talk about the score, you can talk about how stupid the referee's being instead.
Exactly. But that's not going to solve your deep-rooted trauma, is it? That's the thing. So
Yeah, and that's also where, like, the loneliness is happening, because as much as you might have, like, warm bodies around you, you're not actually connecting with those people.
exactly. I always speak about, we talked about therapy, and like I say, I think that the narrative around therapy for men has moved on now, and I think most men would say, I know it's a positive thing, but the challenge is about educating men and helping them understand how it can help them. And for me, and I'm sure that this is right for anyone that's listening that's done therapy, like, it's about having someone that is completely unbiased. And the challenge for me as a man talking to other men or even women in my life, friends specifically, is that when you have something that you feel real shame or embarrassment around, I don't want to tell my best mate about that because I'm worried he's going to look at me in a different light. And
So shame is really connected to silence. So silence breeds shame and shame breeds silence. So the last thing anyone wants to do is talk about the thing that they're ashamed about.
absolutely.
And I think there is a level of, for some people, it's easier to talk to the closest person in their life about it.
Yeah.
And to some people, it's easier to talk to a stranger about it. Which is why, like, I do actually know a number of men who find dating really enjoyable because they feel like they can actually open up to a person on a first date. And then I also know people who, like, their closest guy friends won't know anything about what they're actually going through, but their female friends will.
Yeah.
Because they will feel more accepted in that space to talk about those kind of things, largely because the woman will lead the charge or the conversation around feelings and asking questions around things that men largely don't ask questions around.
So I found that really interesting because I've done a lot of inward looking stuff at that. I've always found women a lot easier to talk to about sort of slightly sensitive topics, and particularly around my own sort of emotional state. But my hypothesis is that that was about my relationship with my mum, right? I see mummy's boys getting a real hard time on social media all the time, particularly on TikTok. But I'm like, that's a positive benefit to me having that positive relationship with my mum, is that she's the one person in my life who I feel like I could say anything to, right? Even if it was something I'm really embarrassed about.
So the reason why there's stick around mummy's boys is because, and same with daddy's girls, like,
Yeah.
it's when a relationship is too close. So there's an in a healthy relationship with a parent, you do need to have boundaries. And if you don't have those boundaries in place, you can have a really great relationship with your mother, but there also needs to be a separation of, like, your mother's opinion can't be more important than your opinion. You have to be able to separate. And things like, especially when a girlfriend comes into your life, that's where there's a lot of conversation around territorial relationships, or a mother overstepping and then your partner not saying anything or not being able to set boundaries because they're so enmeshed that they don't know where they end and their mum begins.
Yeah, exactly. No, I can totally identify with all that stuff. And honestly, speaking from experience, I'm not a mummy's boy. I'm an independent, almost 40-year-old man with a good job in London. But like, I can see it, and I've noticed a little bit of tension when, when I introduced Gabs, my girlfriend, to my mum, because immediately there's this thing where it's like, from my mum's perspective, like my attention isn't just on her anymore. And I think this is something which a lot of guys would experience.
But I think also you see it more, I see it a lot dating, to be honest. Yeah, and it's people who like don't know how to look after themselves is probably how I'd explain it, where like something goes wrong in their life and their first call is their mum rather than actually learning how to do something themselves. And it could be something as basic as like the washing machine broke and like you Google it or you figure out how to get a plumber over or engineer or whatever.
Yeah.
And rather than just calling your mum, it's about that's where there is a stage when you're like in your 18 to 21 where you do need to start being a separate human being and standing on your own 2 feet. And that's where a lot of this conversation is happening, where like there's a lot of overbearing or a lot of like mothers doing things that actually men should be doing for themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I wanted to talk about your own personal experiences of communication and dating. If you, how you don't mind talking about, like, you are slightly back on the dating scene now. And I just wanted you to give me the kind of two examples. Firstly, of like really poor communication when it comes to dating, and particularly
You want to hear the worst one?
yes, absolutely.
2 nights ago, a man unmatched an hour before my date. And what's really weird is he'd been messaging me all day being like, hey, so sorry, like the trains are messing up and like it was awful weather outside. I was like, absolutely, I can meet you at King's Cross if that's easier. And we were in the middle of talking about that when he unmatched. And it just, it's cowardly. Like, and I don't take it as a reflection of myself. I think that's a behavior he's likely done before.
Yeah.
I'm not going to read into why or how, because frankly, like I kind of just move on and I go on another date the next night. But yeah, that was probably the most cowardly thing bar actually being stood up on a date, which I don't think has happened to me yet.
Yeah.
That is like one of the most cowardly things, because ultimately like most women spend time getting ready for a date, and like I had spent all day writing, so I actually had a shower, put makeup on, got dressed, and it was 45 minutes before the date was starting. So I was going to leave the house in 10 minutes. Thank God I hadn't. But yeah, that was probably the worst experience.
But I totally get your point around, like, you're not going to spend time or energy even thinking about why it might have happened. But if you were to try and rationalize that behavior, because I think a lot of women that are listening would have experienced similar behavior.
So the reason why I say that is because I shared about it online and there were a few comments that was like, he was married, blah, blah, blah. And then someone else was like, he clearly found a better date and cancelled you for her. And I was like, first of all, a bit weird if that's 45 minutes before, but also you're making up all these stories and you're making up all these stories to hurt yourself. You don't know this. And so this is why you have to be so careful about what your brain tells you, because unless you know something to be true, why are you making up a story to hurt yourself the most?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not going to spend time trying to analyze a man who is frankly not in my life and never going to be in my life, rather than putting my focus on energy on the guys who do want to be in my life and the guys who, I mean, like right after he did it, what was funny was as I was doing my makeup, I was actually on FaceTime to the guy I was going on a date with 3 days later. And so I called him straight after. I was like, the guy just cancelled. And he was like, oh, well, I'm on a run now, too late. And I was like, run to me. And he was like, no, I gave you that option. You missed it. Serves you right. I was like, well, if it makes you feel better, he unmatched and didn't even tell me why. And he was like, oh, I'm sorry. That's really shit. But like, I'll see you Friday. Like, that's what I mean by like, I moved on with my life. I'm not going to spend my time being sad or miserable about it. People, if anything, like, especially like breaking up with my ex-fiance, like taught me anything around the fact that people are going to be shitty. You don't own that behavior and it's not a reflection on you. Let shitty people continue to do shitty things and move on. Like, focus on the people who are bringing the good to your life.
No, I think that's a very good ethos to have. There was something that you mentioned there, which I just wanted to talk about, and that's about communicating your dating life to the people that you're dating. Because it made me sort of like pull back a little bit when you mentioned that you'd spoken to someone else that you're dating about another
Really?
man. You know,
I'm all about transparency.
that's my own stuff going on there. I'm not saying it's bad or good, but
No, I'm a big believer in transparency, and I also think it's quite common when you're on dating apps that you're not dating exclusively. Like we've not with that guy I was on FaceTime with, we hadn't even been on a first date yet. So yes, I am going on other dates. I hadn't gone on the call and was like, by the way, I'm getting ready for like, but he was getting ready for he was like, so sorry, I need to get ready for my run. I was like, well, if you're getting ready for your run, I'm gonna get ready because I'm about to head out. And he was like, oh, where are you going? I'm now not gonna lie. Like, I'm not gonna go out of my way to say it, but I'm also not gonna lie. So I was like, oh, I'm going on a date. Um, I actually think I've not had any negative reactions around it apart from the guys I wouldn't want to date anyway. So I have had reaction of I don't like that you're going on other dates. And I remember this conversation I had with a guy where he was like, I don't like the fact that you're going on other dates. I was like, respectfully, we've not been on a date yet. And if I were to do it in order, his date was organized before yours. So then if I were to cancel a date, it would be yours. And I was like, we're not dating exclusively. We've not even met yet. You don't get a right to tell me I can't go on other dates yet. Like, that's just not your privilege. That's not, you don't get access to that.
no, it's not. You're right. But my personal take on that would be like, part of that's about their own insecurity and not wanting every single time when I was.
Possessiveness.
Yeah, exactly. And when I was actively dating on the apps, I had this narrative in my head that every single person that I'd arranged to go on a date with, they were like, he's really cool and he's way better than the other guy, so I'm just going to put all my eggs in that basket. But that's not the case. And
But also because, of course, it works in their, of course they want that. It works in their favor. But men have been doing that for years. And so, like, it's only unusual for women to say, like, oh, I'm dating multiple people at the same time. But of course, they want me only focused on them solely. But actually, the reality is when I'm dating someone who I'm truly like interested in and invested in, I'm not swiping on the apps because I want to get to know them more. And if a guy I really like said to me, hey, we've been dating for 2 months. I really like you. I don't like the fact that we're not exclusive. I want to be exclusive with you. I would be like, cool, well, are you exclusive? And I was like, I'm happy to have that conversation. And with one guy, I remember this happened in my mid-20s where I said, like, okay, give me some time to think about it. And I went away and I was like, I was dating two guys at the same time. And I said to the other guy, like, I'm really sorry. The other guy I'm dating wants to be exclusive and I just really want to give it a shot. Like, and I'm like, you're a great guy. I've been having a lot of fun, but I think I'd kick myself if I didn't try.
yeah,
And so I said to him, I was like, thanks for letting me know you wanted to be exclusive. I'm good. I've ended my relationships. I'm happy to get off the apps. Like, it's all about communication, but like I just believe in transparency.
yeah. Okay. When I put out the fact that you were coming on the pod, and we were going to talk about communication, I had loads of questions. So,
Yeah.
and I wondered if we could throw a few of those around.
Oh, quick fire.
Quick fire questions. This is one that you touched on earlier. How do I handle a guy who communicates completely differently in person to how he communicates on text?
Talk about it. I actually had that experience a few weeks ago. He kept sending good morning and good evening text, but not actually asking.
Text.
No, but literally good morning, and then I would reply with questions and he'd just like
Yeah,
it.
right.
And then I'd get a good evening text. And so I was like, "Ugh, this is strange. And also like, why are you starting a conversation to then not have the conversation? So I just said like, hey, I understand to some people, good morning and good evening texts are really important. They're not to me, but I would always love to hear from you if you actually want to connect and have a conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
And so he stopped doing that. And then anytime he texted, it was actually to be like, hey, how's your day going?
I find this whole thing like, because I'm very much an invested texter. When I like someone, I want the conversation to evolve naturally as a conversation. So I'll ask 2 or 3
But also, you have a curiosity about their day.
Yeah,
That's what I found really strange.
That's
So I
how
was like,
conversation works, right?
but also, one of the good evening texts said home. And I was like, cool. Didn't know you were out, but thanks for letting me know. Glad you're home safe, I think. Like, that's where I was getting really confused. And I was like, I've never had someone communicate like that. I found it very strange. So I basically said that. I didn't say I find this strange,
Yeah.
but I said like, hey, this isn't working for me. Like, what I love is for you, like, pick up the phone and call me anytime you want to talk though.
Exactly. That's what I always say to my friends when they're on the apps. I'm like, right, there's this guy and he doesn't seem that invested in the conversation. I'm like, just get on the phone with them. Like, see what they're like on the phone. Because I just think sometimes people are either too busy, or they don't really understand the nature of how texting works. Like,
And until you get to know a person, you actually can't hear their voice when they're texting. Whereas, like, once you know them, like, I text quite abruptly, but like, once people know me, they know that when I just reply with yes or no, it's me getting them the answer they need. And it's not a personal thing of like, to me, it's just like, you've got the answer you need. Cool. If you need something else or you actually want to know about my day, you can ask me another question and I'll answer that too.
yeah, makes sense. The other questions, there was one around. This is something I hear all the time from my female friends. Right, the question is, I struggle to get my boyfriend to communicate when he's feeling unhappy. He just tends to become very insular and very moody. How do I draw out how he's feeling out of him?
Reality is you can't. Like, this is the thing. You can't want someone to change if they don't want to change.
Yeah.
But ways I would say is, can I do anything to help you right now? Would you like me to leave you alone or would you like to talk about it? Asking questions like that and also accepting that their way of processing might not be the same as yours. That, like, no, it's not okay for your boyfriend to be moody or snappy with you. But if their way of being sad or processing their sadness is to be insular, then you also have to respect that too. But being supportive, you can also say, rather than like shaming them or blaming them for not communicating in the way that you want them to communicate,
Yeah.
like, sorry, but your partner's not a a needs
Neat.
meeting device for other people. Like, you have to being able to say something like, is there anything I can do to help right now?
Yeah.
I would love to support you. Would you like a hug? Can I get you a cup of tea? Is there anything I can do? Would you like to be left alone?
And this is it. But I think, sorry to the guys out there that are listening, a lot of guys wouldn't understand what they need. Like, and this is a big problem for men. I used to find it very, very difficult when someone I was in a relationship would ask me that question, because I'd be like, I don't fucking know. I want you to solve this, and it's not fair for me to put that on the other
Yeah.
person. But again, this is where doing a bit of that inward looking stuff is so important.
But this is the thing, like, if you say to a partner, like, would you like to be left alone right now? Or would you like to have a conversation about it? And they say, like, oh, I'd like to be left alone right now. You can come back in an hour being like, do you want to watch TV together? And like, we don't have to talk, but we can spend some time together. Like, they can change their mind,
Yeah.
but at least they know the options. And I think when someone hasn't had those emotional conversations, being given specific options of, do you want me to leave you alone right now? Or do you want to talk? Or do you want to sit in silence next to each other and you just need some company, but you don't want to actually engage right now? Like, being given specific examples really helps a person to be like, it's an easier question to answer than
Yeah.
like, what are you feeling right now?
Exactly. It's a choice rather than an open-ended. So, and I find personally, if there any like a change of environment for me, it normally means that I can think about things in a slightly different way. And whenever me and Gabs have an argument, I'm like, I'm going to go to the gym and then we can talk about it, because I come back and I'm like, oh my God, I completely messed that one up, and that's actually on me. Or sometimes I'll go back and I'll be like, look, this is why what you said hurt my feelings. Final question is, this is a really, really good one. Why don't men talk about topics which they think women can't handle?
Again, it's that thing of like not trusting me to cry alone, for example. Like, I think a lot of men have learned a relationship from their parents of like being so scared of disappointing someone or letting someone down, that that's what leads to the avoidance. That, like, I'm thinking of an example with an ex-partner where I remember my mum had sent a text to him that I wasn't happy about.
Yeah.
And when he told me about it, he was like, I shouldn't have told you. And I was like, whoa, no. Like, I'm okay. I'm upset right now, but I'm okay. It's always better for me to know, though. But like, in his eyes, he was causing me the pain by relaying that information. Whereas in my eyes, I am confident and capable to have my feelings about my mother and about what we're talking about here. But also, you need to trust that I am capable
Yeah.
to do that. And to bubble wrap me or sugarcoat information is actually lying. And I think that's where, like, people think they're softening it, or they think it's a white lie to not say everything. And like, yes, but if it is my right to know and I should be knowing this information, you also have to believe in me enough to be able to cope with that. And that, like, I might have to go through some uncomfortable emotions, but I'm also an adult who's capable of surviving that.
And do you think some of this kind of plays into more traditional gender roles? Like you touched upon like patriarchal viewpoints
Yeah.
that a lot of men may be thinking that women just need to be like nurtured and protected and don't want to or are not capable of hearing.
Well, it makes a man feel bigger to think a woman is weak, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, that's what the patriarchy teaches. And so, assuming incompetence in the woman might not be a conscious thing,
Yeah.
but being like, oh, well, she can't handle that piece of information, or she, like, I'll take care of it. But also coming from the patriarchy side of like the toxic masculinity of like, I'm the man, I must handle it, I must show no fear, no sadness, no like, I can only be like the strong, solid rock, and she can break down and crumble, but then I have to put her back together again. Like all of that assumes really negative things of both parties,
Yes, it
and it's
is.
dysfunctional
Yeah.
rather than just being like, hey, what do you need right now? How can I love and care and support you right now?
Mhm. I did a great panel a couple of months ago with Bumble, and it was an all female panel, and then me. It was interesting. It was great being the gender
Is that the
minority
story of your life?
change. Yeah. But there was something really interesting that came up to it afterwards, where the panel host, an amazing woman called Poppy J, came up and she was like, Tom, if more men just spoke more emotionally and with more vulnerability, like, do they not understand that they would just get laid more? Like, if that is your objective, then just be better at showing that stuff.
I will say though, like I've had such great dating experiences, like especially in my 30s, like men are getting better. Like I think this is where I don't have a lot of space for this like men are trash narrative, because like
Yeah.
the trash men are not the ones you should be dating anyway, so they don't affect you. But actually I was so scared of being single in my 30s again, and just immediately I was like, "Oh no, everyone is smarter, more emotionally intelligent, knows themselves better, knows how to communicate." Like the conversations I'm having are conversations I would have dreamt of having. And like even the bad ones, like 2 days ago I mentioned earlier that like 2 days ago I had someone say like, "Hey, I'm so sorry, but the dating and the celebrity aspect of your career is a lot, and like I don't think it's the right thing for me, and I don't think we're a match anymore." And I was like, thank you so much. Like I really appreciate you telling me, mad respect. Like, and that's word for word what I said to him. I was like, huge respect. Really appreciate it. You know me, I love my honesty. And like 21-year-old me would have loved to have got that text, but like no one trusted me enough that I was an adult enough to be able to receive that, and I would receive it kindly and be like, thank you. Thanks for not wasting my time. Thanks for letting me know. Thanks for communicating.
Right.
And that gives me faith in dating. That gives me like all the experiences I've had in the last like few months is like just great, positive, communicative, emotionally intelligent men.
Right.
And I just think the ones who aren't, the ones who like ghost me or match me an hour before,
Yeah.
like good riddance. You've taken the trash out. Like I don't need it in my life anyway. Like you've shown yourself who you are. But why are we focusing on those people when there are so many people, and like I'm living it right now, but like there were so many people who just like great experiences, whether they last or not, like are people I'm glad I've met.
Mm. No, that's really good. And look, I mean, the purpose of this podcast is not about bashing men. It's about helping people understand male mindset a bit better. And I'm really pleased that you said that. The final question that I just wanted to ask is there a way that we can start empowering men to understand the role of communication in relationships better and to communicate better?
Unfortunately, much like your own life, the main reason people change is because it's causing enough inconvenience or heartache or heartbreak or pain in their own life. Like you need to a certain extent, hit that rock bottom of like, oh, this is doing enough damage that now I'm motivated to change.
Yeah.
And that's most people. Like the reason why I started therapy when I was 20 years old is because I got PTSD. Like I had no choice. I couldn't stop crying. So I had to go. Like, and that's someone who was training to be a psychologist, doing a psychology degree, fully on board with therapy is a good thing, and still wouldn't walk into a therapist office until I was like back against the wall, had no fucking choice. And sorry, I'm not sure I'm allowed to stop.
You can swear as much as you want.
Uh, but that's unfortunately the issue with change. And when I think about like that jump, it's actually the metaphor I use with life coaching in general. Like any personal growth is you kind of standing on one side of the cliff, you seeing this massive gap, and then you're seeing another cliff. But usually Usually you only jump when like the fire's up, literally right up against your back. You can feel the warmth and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, that beautiful paradise waiting on the other side. Like the paradise is attractive. You can see it from like, you can see how good it's going to be, but you're not really going to jump until like there's literally a fire on your side and you can't actually stay on your side anymore.
Exactly.
And that jump is scary, but once you make it to the other side, it's so much easier because you know the benefits of doing work. But it's that first jump of like, okay, I actually have to be curious to change, and I have to be curious to look into how my communication hasn't been working for me.
This is it. And it's not always going to be a positive thing which sparks that journey, right? Like for me, it was about fear of loneliness, of thinking like I seem to be alienating everyone that I'm supposed to love because of my ability to communicate to them, because my lack of any vulnerability with those people. And I was like, I don't want to die alone. Like, and that's quite a serious thing.
No, but this is what I mean, back against the wall. Like you have no choice other than to change.
Exactly that. So, but it's tricky for a lot of men because I think they would rather dive into the fire than do the swimming to paradise.
Well, I mean, thinking about my ex-fiance, for example, like he was like, I don't know how I've got to the point where I've hurt the person I love most in this world.
Right.
And I said, like, great, and let this be your moment of change.
Yeah.
And now go and be better and never do this to another woman. Like, let this be your rock bottom. And like, but unfortunately, there are people where their rock bottom, they stay there and like they don't know how to come out from it. And then they go on to repeat the same pattern. And even in life coaching, like when you have clients, you have to get to a point where like some people don't want to change and you can't be doing more work. And a lot of women do this in relationships too, of like wanting someone to change won't make them change.
Yeah.
And that's when, if you're in a relationship and someone's not willing to communicate with you and you're telling them your needs and they're actively ignoring that, or they're forgetting when you say things, or they're just repeating the same patterns, then you have to actually look at like, oh wait, am I wanting this more for you than you want this for yourself?
Absolutely. The only other point I'd add to that is I think it's very admirable that you're able to take that approach with your ex. No one wants to be someone's rock bottom, right? So you would rather be the person that comes after the.
Oh, I didn't want to be dragged down with him too. I have a need rock bottom thanks to him.
But exactly, but it just goes to show how damaging something like that could be. But
really damaging.
so, yeah. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. I mean, like it is. I think there's a lot around heartbreak where it is a really hard conversation to have, but I do talk about it and I do share it because like I felt so alone in like when I was in the bottom of it, it was just like very lonely and losing that. Like he wasn't just my like best friend, he was like my family. He was like we were creating a family together, all of those things. And I think when you lose that sense of safety, like it does just rock your world. And I think a lot of people are going through heartbreak and loneliness. And I think when and also a lot of people have been cheated on, just like me. And like when that happens, it's so easy to take it as a reflection of yourself of like, what did I do wrong? But actually, at the end of the day, if the relationship was that bad, then they could have ended it. And the shame is on them, not on you. And you don't have to carry that. That's not your baggage.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
No, it's been really good
Not
episode.
to end it on a dark note.
No, not at all. I think it was a really useful conversation. Is there anything that you want to plug or talk about while we're here?
So my dating book's The Selfish Romantic. You mentioned that at the beginning. And then my podcast, In All Honesty.
Amazing. Michelle's podcast is incredible.
Thank you very much.
You get great guests. So yeah, thanks a lot for coming on.